Welcome to Fierce Compassion Podcast. My name is Brett William Simpson and I'm your host. If you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you're second on your own priority list and you're seeking a little bit of self-compassion and self-love, if you're looking to build resilience emotionally, mentally, physically, and even spiritually, then this is the podcast for you. I'm a spontaneous remission cancer survivor, and over the past 13 years, I've learned why some people pass from cancer and while others with the same diagnosis, with the same prognosis, end up living these amazing and fulfilling lives. So I tend to use very big words now. Psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics, and neuroplasticity to sound very clever, but more so to really explain and demystify the magic, or actually the science of what really feeds our health and what starves disease. So Fierce Compassion Podcast shows up people who have wisdom in compassion, in healing, and in being fully human. So if you're willing and capable of taking responsibility for your healing and life, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to Fierce Compassion's fourth podcast. And today I have the privilege to introduce you to Mandi Johnson. Mandy is a mindfulness-based coach. She's a trainer and a facilitator. She has an undergraduate degree from UCT in industrial psychology and sociology. She's a graduate diploma in counseling and coaching through SACAP. She's a registered Commencer coach, and she is a qualified heart math coach. Mandy also runs mindfulness-based stress reduction programs. She was a director of the South African Institute for Mindfulness. She's a cancer thriver, and her personal vision is to encourage and deepen awareness in those struggling and suffering from anxiety, stress, and fear. But the biggest reason why I've asked Mandy to have a conversation with me is that she encompasses one word, and that is compassion. And in this day and age, with what's going on in the world with COVID-19, with so much uncertainty and so much fear, it seems that compassion is one of the most important things that we can delve into and begin to nurture with ourselves. Because if we can do that for ourselves, we can do that for everyone around us. And in times of uncertainty, this is probably the most profound and important thing and theme that we can wrap our heads and our hearts around. So I hope this conversation is illuminating, and I wish you an amazing day. So Mandi Johnson, thank you very much for joining me for this Fierce Compassion podcast. This is just like a casual conversation. Sorry, I cut you off there. Very compassionate. Okay. But I'm making this as real as possible. So if I mess up, I'm going to call myself out on it.
You don't need to worry.
So, Mans, thank you for joining me. Like I'm going to start at one place. So, Fierce Compassion is really my belief around where we can heal ourselves, where we can heal the world, is around the first thing that we have to do is be compassionate with ourselves. We have to understand our needs and be deeply kind to our flaws, and this is where I've learned self-compassion. And I've noticed what's happened with me is that the more I'm kinder to myself, I'm kinder to my partner, then I'm kinder to other people, then I'm kinder to the planet, and then I'm kind, and and I've heard of these cliches my whole life, but it rings so true, frustratingly. But being kind to the world starts with yourself, or being generous starts with yourself. So I've really have really bought into understanding experientially what compassion can do for me and what it's done for me, how it's changed my perspective, how it's softened my edges, how it's improved my relationships. It is literally, I feel, the secret source of the planet that's birthing itself now. So I want to highlight that, and this is why I've asked you, because if there's one person that I know, literally if there's one person that I know that embodies this word more than any other human being that I've had the privilege of meeting, it is you, Mandi Johnson.
Thank you.
You're an incredible human being, and I just wanted to, I suppose, have a conversation with you around this, also around mindfulness, around what I've realized is more addiction in my life because of this lockdown than I'm comfortable usually in speaking into. But I'd love to start with compassion, because it is you, and it's how you carry yourself. It's the space that you so beautifully facilitate with groups that I've luckily been a part of. And I just would like to kind of start there and go, like, Mandy, is this something that you have consciously fostered, or is it something that is the consequence of other choices that you've made, or realizations, or growth, or whatever magic that you focus on? Sorry, I've hogged the limelight the whole time.
That's beautiful. That's such a rich, beautiful introduction. I love it. As always, Brett. I mean, you bring all of yourself to everything. That's what makes you so beautiful.
Thank you.
Compassion is such a deeply personal topic for me, because to answer your question directly, it's cultivated compassion. It's not something that I was. It's easy for me to be compassionate with others in the early part of my life. Very difficult to receive and be compassionate with myself. So this work has taken real, honest work, cushion work, sitting with myself, reparenting myself, talking to myself with kindness. These are the ways that compassion has grown. So not something that just was always there. I think compassion takes a little bit of efforting, a little bit of work, which sounds contrary to what it is. But like with all sorts of development, we're either on that little path, which is rocky and has little bumps and lumps, or the glossy highway, and that's the addictive path, the instant gratification path. And in my experience, it's really about daily coming back to, moment by moment, how am I going to treat myself? What kind of way do I speak to myself? What kind of choices do I make? It's so funny. I mean, I listened to a podcast this week, and Frank Ozitsky, I think that's how I say his name, he was on that. And he has a Zen hospice where he's sat with many people who are dying. And on the podcast that was sent to me, he said such a beautiful line. He said two things that really resonated, which was so deeply compassionate for me. One was, step out of your history and step into the mystery. Oof. Which I absolutely loved.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful. And the other, which I've kind of put here next to so I can see it every day, is, what would love have me do today? What would love have me do today? And I think, the intention behind that is not just for others, but what would love have me do? Be grounded enough to come from that place of, I'm filled up from the inside before I give to others. And I think that's kind of where, your term fierce compassion steps in, because people liken compassion to, let me be kind, let me be gentle, let me give and give and give. And I think that's sort of the default mode of most human beings, especially I think a lot of women particularly land in that, that rescuing, fixing kind of way. And that's a watered down version of what we speak of when we speak of, for me, the compassion. It's deeper. It's deeper than just giving and showing up in a particular way. For me, it's how do I treat myself first and foremost? Am I grounded and balanced? Am I living in integrity? And from that place, maybe I can offer something. Does that answer a little bit?
It does. And there's so many thoughts that are coming up right now. I mean, just something that I resonated with when you're speaking about that, around the efforting that it takes, because I found that at first, when I realized that, quite similarly to you, it's very easy for me to give, it's very hard for me to receive. And that's been an identity that I've created for myself, which means that it's been put into my belief systems. And then it's really hampered me in my life. And a very uncomfortable truth that, I wasn't really taking care of myself. And my cancer journey was, for me, a physical manifestation of the lack of compassion that I had. So I got gooseflesh when you were speaking about that efforting, because it's taken me a long time and a lot of growth and a lot of stretching and a lot of discomfort and a lot of magic as well, to get to a point where I've begun to realize the value of compassion to myself, because that whole, and again, these cliches of, you can't pour a glass that's empty to support somebody else. So, I mean, I forget how the analogy specifically goes, but it's, when when you're constantly trying to give and you've got nothing to give yourself, you start robbing yourself of energy, and you start basically hurting yourself in a way. So there's so much of what you've said that really resonates with me. And the just the one example is that I've been working with a therapist for 16 years, and she is absolutely amazing. And the one day she said to me, Brett, at one point, this was a year and a half ago, at one point she said, you're going to reach a point in your life this year where because I've done all this growth and the stretching, that you're going to be happier than you've ever been, and nothing in the outside of your world will you can pinpoint that this is why I have so much joy. And I wrote it off, and then in the middle of the year I phoned her and I said, there is nothing in my life that is exceptionally favorable or good, but I'm the happiest I've ever been. And it was 2 weeks before I met my now fiance. But what I realized was that year was the year that I really started to own being compassionate with myself, and then what that grew inside of me, which is I think it's the greatest gift that I've given myself. And it's also, I suppose, the reason why I resonate so deeply, and I just love being around you, because you have this energy of compassion. I've done 2 mindfulness workshops with you, Mans. They both have changed the game for me immensely. The first was the MBSR. I think it was the regular course, and now this new one. And mindfulness is becoming such a big part of that journey for me as well, and an ongoing practice. And I do find that if I skip my meditations, or if I start allowing my mind to start running off, my self-compassion goes down, and watching essentially that change. So would you mind just speaking into mindfulness, because this is something that you are a leader in. It's how I look to you as kind of my guru in this space, because you have a very specific and very compassionate style of supporting people in that journey, because it's very hard. I find it's very, very tough to sit in meditation, or to bring your mind back into the present moment. So is there something that you can speak to within mindfulness that also like enhances that compassion?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so valuable and thank you for acknowledging the mindfulness in your life, and that the courses have meant something, because that means something to me. I came into mindfulness probably it's 17 years ago. And at that stage, I always say, even in my groups, I was probably at the darkest place in my life, in terms of having just experienced panic attacks, living not in a recovered way, in a very fiercely codependent way, heightened codependency, addiction. My mom had just passed away from addiction. So I came into mindfulness in a very disintegrated place, a place of desperation, because I didn't know what else to do. And I didn't know how to sit and be with myself. I couldn't be alone. And that's when I did my first MBSR. And what I learned in that MBSR was that I'm not my thoughts and I'm not my feelings. That's what I took from my first MBSR. I can't say that I engaged with the practice religiously every day, but there were moments of glimpsing that there's something here. There's something magic here. There's something there's a dimension inside of myself that is beyond my thinking and my feeling, and it feels peaceful to be there. That's what I took from the first MBSR. And over the years, I've had this love relationship with mindfulness, to the place where me being an obsessive compulsive person, basically a person that is addicted, obsessive thinking, compulsive behaviors, that took the mindfulness to a place where it became an obsessive thing. To sit obsessively, to do mindfulness well, which is so much of how I see in my clients and in the people that I work with. They want to do their mindfulness practice well. They want to improve themselves, fix themselves, better themselves. And in my own experience of going down that road, crashing and burning, and recognizing that this practice isn't about improvement or fixing. This practice of sitting on the cushion courageously is about deeper acceptance of who we are. Like, can we accept we're already whole? Can we accept that we're already enough? And that we just need to perhaps look and remove some of the barriers of what we think we are not. We think we have an idea of this sort of persona of who we are and what we show the world. What is the authenticity? What's underneath all of that? And in my experience, sitting with myself in this way, in one way of sitting and attending to breath or body, that's the attitudinal, that's the attention part of mindfulness, but the attitude you bring to that practice. That for me is far more focus and the feeling tone we just did together. What kind of an attitude do I bring to this practice? Do I bring compassion? Do I bring care? Do I bring trust? Do I bring patience? Or is it still this sort of striving to better myself? Because there's a kind of a poverty mentality to that. Like, somehow I need to improve myself.
Yeah.
And for years, that was what I also thought. I thought, well, surely I need to add more to myself. Surely I need to be a better version of myself, the dialed up version of myself. And that's not what this practice is about for me at all. So to answer your question, mindfulness for me has become sort of a way of being, not something that I do, but just something that I feel into moment by moment. And some moments I catch myself in absolute compulsivity or absolute obsessiveness, and I catch myself in it. And then I bring some kindness to that. I don't say to myself, the obsessive and the compulsive shouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah.
Then only I'm better. It's just part of me. I'm neurotic, anxious, obsessive, compulsive, controlling, and I'm okay with all of those things.
Yes, mate. Yeah. Yeah, what you're saying there, just like, even as you're saying those words about yourself and the way that you say it and the tone that you say them in, just it allows me to accept parts of myself that I've been really challenged to accept. And it's like, I truly thank you for it. Honestly, this is very sincere. Look at me trying to sincere my sincerity. I've noticed quite deeply that when I've had a session like with the Feeling Tone 8-week program that I was a part of with you, I had this incredible journey with judgment. Judgment, it was, and it's brought it up in such a powerful and beautiful way. And actually, I've had a big shift this last weekend around it. In turning, and most of that is turning to myself and going, Brett, you're not worthy. Brett, you don't know what you're doing. Brett, you're running this kind of, you're presenting yourself in the wrong way, or this, and all of those sorts of judgments that have come up. And what I've also realized through the Feeling Tone 8 weeks is that is acceptable. And if there was anything that I took from that course, it was that I'm okay with all of the shadow, as well as the more favorable qualities that I see in myself, the ones that I want to align to, that are more popular, that are more morally correct. And what I've found is that there's been such a difference in how I carry myself, how I feel, how I show up in the world is what I meant by that, but also how I feel internally, by accepting those hard edges and those moments in so many of those meditations where like somebody could be this could be a noise coming from outside, and then it'd be like, that's wrong, that shouldn't happen, I'm meditating, I'm in a zen place. And just allowing all of that through, and then that being metaphorical around what's happening inside of me, around the hard edges or the things that I don't like about myself. Like you speak about addiction, and thank you so much for being vulnerable around everything that you said, because I think I've spoken to you about this before, but I took 3 years to give up alcohol, and I had a really beautiful human being help me through that process. And what he did was he just held up a mirror with me, but so gently, was just, it's okay. What did we learn? What sort of, what's come from this, either failing, falling off the wagon, or getting back on and deepening something? And the compassion has been the thing that has allowed me on the 3rd of January 2020 to give it up. And I know for the last time, because I haven't had one craving in 3 months, over 3 months, 4 months now. And it's because I think I'm aware that, like, I'm happier. I can feel the difference in me. And the compassion that I had in that 3-year journey to get to this point now has kind of laid the foundation for me to let go of it without what I felt like these claws of kind of pulling me back again and again and again. There's just this calm, and it was self-compassion that got me through that. So I just love the fact that the mindfulness for me has been the tool and the work. The addiction has been the judgment and the problem and it took self-compassion for the first time. For the first time I've used self-compassion to be able to kind of heal through past certain things, and my drinking was certainly one of those. So Mans, thank you so much for bringing that in. And we also, just to kind of plant a segue around addiction, I've noticed so we're at I think going on to day 40 tomorrow for the COVID-19 lockdown. And I've noticed with a lot of discomfort, addictive thinking, and how this thing has been conditioned, or I've allowed it to be conditioned, or I've conditioned it, all of those to be true in my mind, around how I see the world, how I think, and how I act and react. And I've realized how toxic sometimes my mind can be, and those thoughts. And what just to give you a little bit of insight. So for 5 weeks, I kind of read everything that everybody sent me, and what I've realized was discernment. I've dropped the word judgment a bit, because discernment, I feel, is something that really resonates with a lot more with me. And I've realized for myself that addiction is so much more than my relationship with alcohol, or my relationship with cigarettes, and my relationship with running. I was addictive runner for 3 years as well, doing ultra marathons nearly every 3 months. So I'd love for your thoughts just around addiction in a broader scale, because I'm seeing a lot more in my life than I was originally comfortable, because addiction is such a, those are other people who've got problem drinking or alcohol or drugs. No, it's another level, another layer has opened up for me. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on like the mind addiction, and how our thinking actually can drive us into poor behavior.
Oh, well done, first of all. I mean, it sounds like you've made that like deep commitment, and it's interesting that you say, once you it's an awakened value that you're living by, it's a spiritual transformation recovery. It's, it's not, sobriety is not recovery. So many people put something down and just pick something else up. But once you decide to live from a place of an awakened value, which is an awakened value for me is it's sort of a much deeper connection to the process of recovery, which I'll speak to in a second. I just want to talk about the addictive side. For me, the more I read and the more I understand and the more I come from a family, a long line of addiction. For me, we pick up any sort of soothing substance when we, like, in our teenage years already. There's something under the surface that sits there, trauma, not feeling enough, something that I need to soothe, something that so it's very useful to pick up a substance or to pick up a behavior and to then somehow medicate that away. So for me, addiction is much more prevalent in the society we live in, because it asks of us to do things that are feeling, on the whole, quite insane most of the time. The driven doing, the I must improve myself, the Instagram, the things that are coming at us all the time, that there's no space to stop. There's no space to cultivate some inner intimacy. There's just feed me more, do. And I think, it's, you speak about sort of thinking, obsessive thinking. That is an addiction in our society. It's 100% an addiction, because it's where we live safely. We think that somehow the future is going to bring us to a place where we feel better about ourselves, or we ruminate continually about some past mistake we made, and becomes part of our sort of facade personality. So for me, every human being is in some way addicted. And so I don't feel quite alone, and I feel no shame whatsoever in saying that I'm an addict. Because I think in society it's just so normal now, and particularly alcohol. Alcohol is such a socially acceptable sort of social lubricant. Everybody drinks. It's the person in the room that doesn't drink that people kind of stare at now.
It's a problem being there without drinking, because there's a lot of pressure that comes, and the conversations are hectic.
Yeah, in my experience, you can stop that conversation just by saying I'm an alcoholic, in the whole room you just hear clank, 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 clank. Not you, surely not.
Yeah, sure.
But so it's very useful for me to own it, and to live in a recovered way. It feels deeply meaningful for me now. I don't have any shame around it. And as I say, sobriety isn't necessarily recovery, because recovery is a very deeply, for me, a spiritual transformation. And that's not got anything to do with any religion. Everybody has their own religion and ideas of what that means. But for me, spirituality is a deep inner intimacy. I'm comfortable with myself, and I'm talking about all of myself. I'm not talking about parts that you spoke about so beautifully, sort of the parts that I like about myself. I'll show those off, but I'm going to kind of hide in the recess the things that I don't like about myself. But for me, there's something about vulnerability and authenticity that are very deeply related to wholeness, to being a whole human being, bringing all of myself to the occasion, which means, when I teach, and you've been in some of the courses, I don't try and deny that I'm an anxious person. I'm not somehow, I've found some sort of utopian bliss that I'm now a mindfulness practitioner. I don't feel any of that. In fact, I just feel very human being with other humans when in working with the mindfulness, because I think, anxiety is still very much part of my experience. And that sort of controlling, compulsive sort of way, it's something I learned as a child to feel safe. If I can keep everything just so, then maybe I'll be safe on the inside. So what mindfulness has done for me is highlight for me when those things are emerging and coming up. So through COVID, I noticed, you shared so beautifully, sort of so much coming, and you became more discerning. For me, in the beginning of COVID, I noticed the pull towards wanting to take on the 21-day challenge of this and the 21-day challenge of that, because the feeling of desolation, of complete fear, panic, desolation, grief were there. And my old default mode would be fill up the spaces. And it was really intriguing for me to notice that I had no need to do that this time around. I didn't have the energy to do it. I just put it all away. And I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll just tune into what I need. What do I need moment by moment? What can I listen? David White's poem, we always read that voice. Can I come close in with that voice that's speaking to me from the inside? Let me really do that. And it's been extraordinary, this pandemic, in many ways, because I think it's the first time in my life I've listened to my own creativity from such a non-judgmental way. And I've been so surprised at what's emerged from this in terms of art, writing, exploring, the intimacy and connection with my husband, in terms of real sort of connection. I think we've had 2 little skirmishes that lasted maybe a few minutes, and then we smiled. We're staying in a very small space together. I haven't been outside in any way, shape, or form in 42 days. And it's for me, it's been sort of a retreat. It's been an opportunity. And in terms of the fear of the future, I mean, we were chatting the other day, my husband and myself. We could never have predicted this pandemic. So that thought of, there could have been another fear. You and I we're cancer thrivers. We live each day with gratitude. We could never have predicted a pandemic would have hit us in 2020. I turned 50 in January. This was my year of 50. I had imagined what this was going to be. I certainly didn't imagine this little virus creeping into my life.
Yeah, sure.
But in many ways, it's kind of brought a new sense of intimacy with myself, with my surroundings. It's brought gratitude, appreciation, and it's also brought another thing, which for the first time I'm really feeling into. Future has collapsed, and in that is freedom. I mean, that is really true. Because what we can imagine sometimes just doesn't even happen. You know that we couldn't have imagined the cancer. We couldn't have imagined the pandemic. So all this investment in some sort of a stable future is it's an exercise in futility. And it does with that come a lot of freedom. Because now I feel like if I can just give a little bit of myself each day, authentically sit and serve the people that I'm working with, then and give a little bit of myself, then that energy in some way comes back. And that's enough for a future. If I live in a humble, grounded, still, quiet way, then somehow life just seems to happen anyway. Like, why invest all this energy, this mind addictive stuff in, I need to do something. I need to constantly do something. And I really get it, Brett. Like, really get the need for survival, the need to create, the need to but I know when I'm completely stuck in that, everything just doesn't work. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. It's like there's a flow in this work. You've got to give of your heart. And if you give of your heart, then somehow it seems to come back. And you have to be in integrity with it. And I think that's what you've been called to. Like, what I know about you is this deep calling for integrity in what you do. And that's by putting that, alcohol, I'm putting you down. I've done you now. I've practiced with you enough. It's not serving me anymore. That's a huge step into living your truth, living with integrity. We can't do this work without it, and I've certainly made huge mistakes in my life. I've been down very dark paths. And I haven't always lived in integrity and honesty, and the shame that comes with that is not even worth it. It's not worth, all of that mind stuff is not worth it. It's so nice to just live in a way where you put your head on the cushion and I've lived a good day. I've lived for my truth. I've lived humbly. I've lived in integrity. And I suppose that's kind of the deepest, most compassionate way I can be with myself, is to, say what Frank said in that podcast, you need to put your history down to step into the mystery. And that's a little bit of what I suppose is happening now, because living in that past is just, and I think for a lot of addicts and people that have lived with addiction, they've done things they are not particularly proud of, expressed themselves in ways that haven't been kind to others. And so in a way we learn from those things, and if we can then just forgive ourselves, put it aside for a moment, and then maybe something else is here also. So that's sort of a long version of what addiction has taught me. It's been a gift. It's been a gift for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in what you're saying that resonates with me. I hardly know where to reflect back on, but the one thing I just really would like to is, man, you live by the principles that you teach, and that for me is very, very rare, and that is something that I strive to do, especially with this podcast as well, because I found two things that have been really beautiful and tough, and through my acknowledgement of my addiction to alcohol, have been, like you said, now just the biggest gifts, because that I've carried that shame of, and what I thought was normal, as in going, I'd sit in a conversation with somebody at a fry or something like that, and I'd go like, oh, my drink is halfway down, like I really need to get, and my mind would just follow this trail of, I need to have another drink in order to kind of suppress things. And once I've taken that away, there's been a rising of authenticity for me. There's been a rising of vulnerability, and I love Brené Brown's work around this. There's been an alignment to Russell Brand's work, which I love, and you shared at a beautiful one of the most powerful podcasts I've ever heard, which was between Russell Brand and Gabor Mate. It's just like I watch it again and again and again, and there's something so beautiful and so powerful about the addiction that sits within all of our lives. And it just helped me realize that there's more for me to kind of accept within myself around that. Because as you were speaking, I'm sitting there going like, I've got a problem with wine gums at the moment. Because I have noticed that when I've taken the alcohol away, the sugar need has gone up, and I'm like, oh, okay, let me have an orange instead. But sometimes I go for the wine gums consciously.
Yeah, absolutely. Consciously eat
with compassion.
Eat in moderation. Eat in moderation.
Sometimes not, Mandy. Sometimes not.
And sometimes not a whole packet of speckled eggs.
Yeah. No, it's.
Yeah, I think it's just to give ourselves a little bit of a break sometimes. Just to give ourselves a little bit of an out breath, because I think it's a lot that you're dealing with. It's a lot that I'm dealing with. It's a lot that the world's dealing with. It's really unprecedented for us to be asked to, and I think part of the gift that I feel is having cultivated a sense of stability in mind with practice, that I don't feel so scared of being alone and scared of sitting here and scared of the unknown and the uncertainty. And I think that for me, sometimes people ask me why practice, or why do a meditation practice, or why do a spiritual practice. Is because we're all preparing in some way. Our biggest fear is dying. Our biggest fear is the end, full stop. What does that mean? The end of me. And I think as I sit and as I engage with spirituality, it's kind of dying off parts of myself moment by moment that are no longer of service, and then discovering that actually what's left, there's birth and death, but there's no opposite to life. It's life that's left. It's awareness. It's a dimension that is so deep and so in between the spaces. It's always here, that there's no fear of it not being there anymore, because it can't not be. It is, So I think it's worth, doing something around this practice. It's worth taking on a spiritual practice, whether it be meditation, whether it be prayer, whatever the thing is that deeply resonates. It doesn't need to be a meditation. It can be a walk, it can be a swim, it can be a surf, whatever your practice is,
Yeah, I've so there's two bodies of work that I really I dive in for the science that sits behind them, and the one is Radical Remission, and you've heard me speak about this, by Kelly Turner. So she went and interviewed over 1,500 people who had these spontaneous healing remissions from cancer. And I've had this conversation with you. I know cancer has been part of your path and part of your journey and part of your healing, as well as and it has for me. It's been the greatest gift I feel like I've created in my life, because my belief system is that I did create it by the way that I thought, felt, and ate and showed up in the world. And what you speak about in that spiritual practice is something beautiful that she speaks to, in that it's not necessarily a religion, it's not necessarily anything, but it's a practice in the morning that essentially anchors you to yourself, to nature, to God, to whatever that version of yourself that gives you space. And her whole reasoning for the spiritual pillar that she presents, and all of these amazing people who've cured themselves of cancer through or healed. Cured is a tricky word that I prefer not to use, but have healed and are still on the healing path, have got this space that can best be summed up in, when I read it, is mindfulness or meditation or prayer. But it's this practice, usually done early in the morning, that has their version of that. Of whatever that might be. For some people it's watching the sunrise, for other people it's meditating, for other people it's prayer. And I just, and then I look at the other body of work that I work with, and that's Dan Buettner's Blue Zone work, where he's been studying for over 15 years these pockets in the world where people live well past 100, but they live high quality lives. It's not dragging around these depleted bodies. It's 100-year-old people going fishing 4 hours a day so they can feed their family with some level of purpose, but with huge joy, like amazing joy. And again, one of their pillars is a spiritual practice. And it's not necessarily a religion, and he speaks to that, but it's around this practice, which I suppose leads me to, the kind of the final segue for me around this, Vance, because, I have my own practice in the morning, you have yours. What interests me is the people that you've worked with. So you've got a little eye in, and what I find beautiful around my coaching practice is that I get this amazing gift to work with so many people in a very vulnerable, authentic space, and they give me wisdom around how they take mindfulness and interpret it within their lives. And is there anything that you can share that somebody who might be having difficulty, be it COVID, be it cancer, because I personally know that it is something that's helped me heal past and process all of those, the feelings that cancer brought up, the feeling that I know a lot of people right now, because I really see so many similarities in the cancer journey to what people are going through with COVID, because it's death in the subconscious. You're processing a perception of what death might be, and there is a death. There is a death of an old way of showing up. There is a death of the world that is passing now, which for me, I think, like with you, there's something really exciting because something is being created in that vacuum, and we've needed this, for me as a planet, for a very long time. So there's something quite beautiful growing. But back to the individual, is there something that you give guidance to with your the people that you coach that you've got from your experience or your understanding of what works, or any guidance or any wisdom that you might be able to give who are starting this mindful journey, who might be like going, okay, this is this mind thing, or this my habits, or how I'm showing up in the world, I can't carry on like this. And there's a lot of that going on. Is there any wisdom that you can give around people who are in that space right now, around mindfulness and the journey and the experience that you've had, that you can give them?
I think it's I think the thing that I would say, which is really, really important, is to really know where you're at. In terms of your we spoke in our course about willingness and capacity. I mean, everyone has a deep willingness to want to be a whole human being and to be at peace and be at ease. I mean, that would be sort of the intention of most people that I work with. I just want to be at peace. I just want to not feel this emptiness that sits here at the pit of my stomach, this meaninglessness. I just want to be at ease, at peace. So lots of willingness. And we start off like at the beginning of the COVID, the first week, like rah, 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 push-ups, let's get going, and then this huge sort of deflation, this failure, this perceived, I'm not measuring up, I'm failing. And it happens same with mindfulness, and I would say, check in with your capacity day by day. There's no great virtue in sitting for hours and hours in a meditative state, in this kind of certain way of sitting. That's not what we've been asked here. You can sit in a chair. You can have a mindful cup of tea on the balcony. You could, my understanding of mindfulness for people that are struggling is just try and do one thing at a time. That's it. Do one thing at a time. So that sounds like, oh, that's easy enough. But just watch yourself, So when you're doing the dishes, do the dishes. When you're showering, you're not on a journey of 1,000 different stories in your head. And it's not that easy to do. Our mobile phones, our devices, like, put it away, hide it away, and watch just the movie. Or and I struggle with these things. We always our attention is so drawn to various things all the time, and that takes mental energy and exhausts you. So try and do one thing at a time. And if you really feel that your capacity is particularly low in a day, then lie down and listen to a meditation. Literally lie down with your blanket, with your cup of tea next to you. Take breaks if you need to. Open your eyes if you're feeling overwhelmed. Be kind to where you are in your tolerance level of being able to be with the practice. And if it feels difficult, stop and do something physical. do a yoga movement, or you don't necessarily even need to do yoga. You can do a mindful movement. Yoga's got such a whole connotation to it. A mindful movement, a walk with feeling into your feet. These are all things we can do that bring us into the present, the fullness of this moment, the fullness of this, not in our heads, because our heads have got these horror stories. And as I said, we can't predict, because who would have ever predicted this? It's our horror stories. My horror story is I'm somehow going to be completely lost and unsafe, and no one's going to love me, and I'm going to be alone in the world, sitting on the sidewalk. That could be the worst thing that could ever happen to me, completely abandoned. And that can never happen anymore, because I won't abandon myself. So there will always be someone there for me, which will be the kindest part of myself for the most vulnerable part of myself. So that doesn't live in me anymore as furiously. And I know it's not as, the boogeyman is not so big anymore in my head. And that's what this practice can do. It's a deep intimacy with this dimension of being that is always there for you, no matter what. Because if we're going to be at our final moments, and again, I speak to this podcast, Frank, as they were doing this podcast, someone called in and said they have a month to live. They've got terminal diagnosis, and they're alone, and it's COVID. Can you give me some wisdom of how to handle this? And the teacher was saying, we're all alone at the end in some way. But if you inquire deeper into that, that's not really true. And that I know to be true from the inside.
Yeah.
And so if I'd say, part of why we, the motivation, check in with your motivation for doing this practice, the spiritual practice we spoke about, because there is such value in engaging with spirituality in this way, whether it be prayer or something, because to really experience the experiential side of that dimension, you can't read it in a book, you can't watch a podcast or watch you don't watch podcasts, you can't watch that, you can't get it from somewhere, it can't be transmitted that way. It can only be felt, experienced, and that means we have to be with ourselves a little bit quietly, and that's worth it. That's what this practice is about. Yeah.
Sure. Mans, you finish off with such compassion back in mindfulness. Those seem to be all kind of mixed up within you, which is amazing, because the willingness and the capacity for me that you spoke of it's been such a deep lesson for me to learn that. And I find even now, like I've been over the last few days just looking at how my brain's been kind of working. Like I've got to get up in the morning at a certain time to do my exercise, because thank goodness, and I'm so grateful for it. I've got huge gratitude for that time to get out there. But I find that there's this program that automatically kicks in that, I have to do this and I have to do this, and then my to-do list grows. And I know to be true that is not the way that I best work. And it's been very tricky for me to go, what is my willingness and my capacity right now to do this work? Because sometimes when I'm inspired, I'm like creatively things are coming and opening and beautiful stuff is happening. But then this morning, like I went for a run and I had no capacity. And I had so many times to sit there and go like, I've got to get out of my head that this is a run, and I've got to enjoy my surroundings and take in, and I'm going to have a walk now. But yet to allow myself again, I had to constantly come back again and again to my willingness and my capacity. So I'd love to end off on that note, because it is the most beautiful thing that you've given me over the last 3 months. It really, really, really has, because now what I realize is that I actually becoming so much of a better human being. I'm showing up better in the world because I'm checking in, what have I got inside of me now to be able to show up in this way? What have I got? And I'm basing now more, and I know it's a process. I know it's going to take a while, is to go, okay, well, I've got this amount of energy for this project, and that's what I've got, and to be okay with that, to be non-judgmental, and to just be kind. So
it takes courage. It takes courage.
I do. It takes a huge amount of courage to be kind to yourself. I find. And I find it's interesting because I look at the world and it's a lot of very strong, what feels like very patriarchal energy. We've got to do stuff. We've got to tick things off. And what I feel now rising inside of me and in the conversations that I'm having is that, wait, what do I need? How does this nurture me? How does this support me? How do I align to my authenticity, my vulnerability in this moment to say, like, I've got no capacity for this or for that, and go, I need to honor this.
I'd just like to say, I mean, I really want to honor Mark Williams, because he brought that to me, you know, the willingness and capacity. You know, it's not something that's a Mandi Johnson thing, but it really, you know, by him teaching me that, it really allowed me to understand how many times in my life I've pushed past what I was capable of being or able to do at that time. And like you say, you're starting to understand that, you know, so I just want to just honor him a little in this moment around, you know, his gift to me was that willingness and capacity. So I'm so glad it resonates with you. Yeah.
Massively. Thank you so much. And also, like, I also would just, again, want to honor you, because this is something that you've taught me that has impacted my work and my life, and my relationships are healthier because of what you have helped me to see. So Mandy, I love you to absolutely. Thank you so much for being through this.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Well, I sincerely hope that this podcast has given you a little bit of insight, something to chew on, and maybe just a little bit of permission in the future, or at some moment today or tomorrow, just to be kind to yourselves, to bring a little bit of more compassion in. And as you've heard from Mandy, and I can definitely agree with that, it's something that is built up over practice. It's something that requires efforting, and it requires a bit of courage. In fact, for me, it requires a huge amount of courage to actually be compassionate with myself. So, yeah, I hope this podcast resonated with you. And if you have any inclination to bring in a little bit more fierce compassion or compassion within your life, I could not recommend Mandy more. Just her mere energy, being around her energy, you'll understand experientially what it is to be compassionate just by being around her. So you can contact her through her primary website, which is www.mindfulinsight.co.za, and then to learn a little bit more about MBSR, www.mbsr-south.co.za. And if you're interested in having a conversation with me, or intrigued to become a client or learn about my program, please go to my website, www.brettwsimpson.com. And I wish you an amazing day, and thank you so much for your ears, your attention. I sincerely appreciate you taking in and choosing my podcast. I realize there's a lot of information out there, and I'm very grateful for those of you who resonate with my work and my purpose. And yeah, thank you. Have yourself a wonderful day.